Renegade Immortal Chapter 3, Chapter Bray. Before the towering gates of the Xianxia sect, where clouds coiled like silent dragons and the mountains stood as ancient sentinels, Wang Zhao remained frozen in place, his mind shaken to its very core. The spectacle before him, so far removed from the mortal world, left him dazed. It took a long while before his thoughts returned, and when they did, the arrogance he once carried in his heart had quietly withered away. Just then, streaks of radiant light tore across the sky. Rainbow-colored swords descended one after another, each trailing brilliance like falling stars. As each sword dispersed into shimmering fragments, a disciple of the Hengyu sect emerged, and behind each disciple stood several youths, all around 15 years of age. Boys and girls alike stepped onto the ground, their expressions mirroring those of Wang Lin's group. Wide-eyed, stunned, overwhelmed by the grandeur and mystery of the immortal sect before them. The disciples who escorted them gathered to one side, speaking quietly among themselves as they observed the youths. Time passed, and more arrivals followed, until at last all those recommended for entry had assembled. Then, a black-clad middle-aged man stepped forward. His gaze swept across the gathered crowd like a cold wind over a battlefield. Without warmth, without hesitation, he spoke, his voice flat and emotionless. "Among all of you, only a few will be selected to become disciples of the Hengyu sect." His words struck like thunder. A wave of shock rippled through the youths. Some gasped aloud, others stiffened in disbelief. Wang Lin's heart trembled violently. He quickly counted. There were 48 people present. 48, and only a handful would remain. The middle-aged man continued, his tone unchanged. "The path of cultivation, the road to immortality, depends on one's natural talent. The first test is to determine whether your spirit is strong enough." His finger lifted slowly. "Those I point to will step forward." The first youth was chosen. With trembling legs, the boy walked forward, fear written across his face. The man placed a hand upon his head. "Not qualified. Stand to the left." Those two words shattered the boy's spirit. His body seemed to lose all strength as his face turned pale and empty. Without a word, he staggered to the left side, his gaze hollow. Another youth stepped forward. "Not qualified." Another. "Not qualified." Again. "Not qualified." 10 in a row. 10 hopes crushed, one after another, like fragile leaves beneath a storm. And still, not a single person stood to the right. Then it was Wang Zhuo's turn. The pride that once adorned his face had vanished completely. His complexion was pale, his steps cautious as he approached. The middle-aged man placed his hand upon Wang Zhuo's head. Suddenly, his expression changed. His eyes lit up. "What is your name?" he asked. Wang Zhuo quickly cupped his hands, bowing respectfully. "Immortal, my name is Wang Zhuo." The man nodded, a faint smile forming on his lips. "So, you are the one martial teacher mentioned. Good." His voice carried approval. "Wang Zhuo, stand to the right." In that instant, Wang Zhuo felt as if he had ascended above all others. Under countless gazes filled with envy and admiration, he walked to the right side. His eyes swept across the crowd, filled now with arrogance and disdain. In his heart, he felt untouchable. Beside Wang Lin, Wang Hao curled his lip and muttered quietly, "Motherfucker, he's one lucky dog." Wang Lin said nothing, but within him, tension coiled tighter and tighter. His fists clenched as the image of his parents' hopeful eyes rose before him. He could not fail. He must not fail. "Not bad. You also stand to the right," the middle-aged man said with a hint of surprise to a young girl. Time passed. One after another, the youths were tested. And yet, when it was nearly over, only 2 people stood on the right side. It was Wang Hao's turn. Unlike the others, he rushed forward without hesitation. Before the test even began, he dropped to his knees and kowtowed repeatedly. "Immortal, may you enjoy a long life," he exclaimed eagerly. "My name is Wang Hao. You've tested so many people. You must be tired. Why not take a rest? I'm not in a hurry, no problem at all." The middle-aged man burst into laughter. After witnessing so many fearful faces, this clever, shameless youth, completely unafraid, was trying to curry favor in his own way. Amused, the man placed his hand upon Wang Hao's head. "Talent is lacking." "Not." Before he could finish, Wang Hao's heart dropped into the abyss. But he reacted instantly. Without waiting, he hurriedly pulled out a jade box and held it forward with both hands. "Immortal," he said quickly, his voice full of urgency and flattery. "My father found this in the mountains, but he couldn't open it. I specially brought it to offer to you." The middle-aged man chuckled, about to refuse, but the moment his eyes fell upon the box, his pupils shrank, his expression changed. "Not bad," he murmured, now examining it closely. "This is at least a 300-year-old mushroom, and this jade box, it was sealed by a cultivator. No wonder your father couldn't open it." He paused, his voice shifting ever so slightly. "I happen to need a helper for my alchemy." His gaze fixed on Wang Hao. "Are you willing?" Wang Hao was stunned. The heavens had turned in his favor. He leapt to his feet, his excitement impossible to contain. "Yes, Immortal, I am willing." The middle-aged man chuckled again. "Since you'll be assisting me, I won't treat you poorly. You may cultivate just like the other disciples." He pointed to the right. "Go stand there." Wang Hao's heart surged with joy. He dashed over to the right side, throwing Wang Zhuo a triumphant look as if to say, victory had not belonged to him alone. Meanwhile, the rest of the youths, their faces grew pale. Despair settled in their hearts. Some could no longer hold back their emotions. Tears began to fall. The middle-aged man frowned. "Send away those who are crying." Immediately, several Hengyue sect disciples stepped forward. With swift movements, they seized the weeping youths and departed upon swords of light, vanishing into the sky without a trace. Silence returned. Then the man pointed at Wang Lin. Wang Lin inhaled deeply. Step by step, he walked forward, his heart pounding wildly, his mind blank, except for one thought: his parents' expectations. Within his chest, he prayed silently, "I will definitely be selected." The man's hand descended onto his head. Time seemed to freeze. Then, in a voice devoid of emotion, the two words fell like a blade. "Not qualified." In that instant, Wang Lin's world shattered. He did not remember how he moved. He did not remember how he reached the left side. All he heard was a roaring like spring thunder in his ears, and those two words, echoing endlessly: "Not qualified, not qualified, not qualified." When the test ended, only 3 stood on the right. To everyone else, they appeared like towering peaks, unreachable, insurmountable. Wang Zhuo glanced at Wang Lin, his face filled with contempt, as if looking upon something worthless. Then, the middle-aged man spoke once more. "While a strong spirit is required to become a cultivator, perseverance is even more important." His gaze swept across the remaining youths. Even ordinary people can become disciples of the sect if their perseverance is sufficient. He paused. "The second test is perseverance." He pointed toward the mountain path. "Climb the stone steps." His voice remained cold and steady. "If you reach the summit, you pass. If you fail to complete it within 3 days, you fail. Those who fail will be sent back to their families." He added, almost casually, "If you can no longer endure it, or if danger arises, shout loudly. Someone will come to save you." Then his expression softened slightly as he turned to the 3 chosen youths. "You two, follow me to meet the patriarch. We will also find you suitable masters." His gaze shifted to Wang Hao. "You don't need to go. Come with me to the alchemy house and familiarize yourself with the place." With that, he turned. Taking the 3 selected youths with him, he vanished into the mountains, like a shadow swallowed by the vastness of heaven and earth. Silence lingered. Wang Lin stood there for a moment. Then he took a deep breath. His eyes burned with determination. Without hesitation, he stepped onto the stone path. The test of perseverance had begun. From the original 48 youths, only 39 remained, after the 3 chosen and the 6 who had been taken away. Among these 39, some were crushed by despair, some were filled with unyielding determination, some trembled in fear. Yet all of them, step by step, began to ascend, each walking toward a future unknown beneath the silent gaze of the immortal mountains. The mountain path wound upward like a cruel serpent carved into stone, its jagged steps uneven and treacherous. On either side yawned an endless abyss. One careless step, one flicker of weakness, and a body would vanish into the void below, swallowed by the mountain's silent hunger. Wang Lin climbed. Less than half a day had passed, yet his legs already felt as though they had been forged from iron and filled with lead. Each step was heavier than the last. Sweat drenched his clothes, clinging coldly to his skin, while his breath came in ragged bursts that burned his lungs like fire. When he had first gazed upon this mountain from below, the path had seemed short, nothing more than a narrow road leading upward. But now it stretched endlessly into the heavens, as though it would never reach its end. A chill spread through his heart, and despair began to stir like a dark tide. Ahead of him, more than a dozen youths struggled upward. Their bodies were strong, their backs broad, yet even they moved slowly, each step labored, each breath heavy. Their faces were pale, their chests heaving. Yet despite their exhaustion, not one of them had chosen to turn back. Wang Lin clenched his teeth until they ached. This was his only chance. The hopes of his parents surged within his mind like a flame that refused to die. Their eyes, filled with expectation, pressed against his spirit, forcing him forward. And then a sudden slip. From behind him, a boy lost his footing. A scream tore through the air as the youth tumbled off the side of the mountain, his voice filled with terror. "I give up! Help!" The cry echoed through the cliffs, sharp and desperate. Every climber froze, instinctively turning their heads to look down. For a fleeting instant, all they could see was the falling figure. And then, like a streak of darkness cutting through the void, a flash of black light appeared. A Hengyue sect disciple emerged from nowhere. With a single motion, the disciple seized the falling boy. Their figures slowed, then descended gently, drifting toward the base of the mountain as if carried by an unseen force. Silence followed. Wang Lin's face turned pale. Without a word, he lowered his head and resumed climbing, his movements careful, deliberate, as though even the wind might push him to his death. Time lost its meaning. Each breath felt longer than the last. Each step seemed to stretch into eternity. 2 days passed. Far ahead, the silhouettes of those dozen youths could still be seen, faint shadows moving upward through the haze. Wang Lin did not know how many among them would surrender before reaching the summit. He only knew one thing. He could not give up. His feet were no longer whole. The flesh had split, blood soaking through his shoes, swelling and tearing with every step. Pain surged through him, sharp and relentless, like countless needles stabbing into his flesh. Eventually, even standing became unbearable, so he crawled. Using his hands, he dragged himself upward, each movement leaving behind streaks of blood upon the ancient stone. Then, from above, a figure descended. A middle-aged man, his complexion pale and sickly, drifted downward along the steps as though untouched by gravity itself. His robes fluttered gently, and his eyes carried a distant, weary light. "Little children," his voice echoed softly, yet it seemed to reach every ear. "Keep your hearts firm. This path is merciless, but it is not without meaning. Nothing you endure here is in vain." He sighed, long and heavy, as if burdened by countless memories, and continued his descent. As he passed each youth, he glanced at them briefly. When he came upon Wang Lin, however, he paused. This was the 6th youth he had encountered, and of them all, this boy was the most wretched. His clothes were soaked through with blood. His body was torn and battered, as if every inch of him had been ground against the mountain itself. His knees were mangled, his toes twisted and broken. He no longer walked. He clawed his way forward like a beast refusing death. The man's eyes softened. "My child?" he asked gently. "What is your name?" But Wang Lin heard nothing. His vision had long since blurred into a haze of red and black. His mind clung to only a single thought: reach the summit or die. To him, the world had vanished. Only the path remained. The man studied the boy's eyes. Deep within them burned something unyielding, something that refused to bow. He raised his hand and placed it upon Wang Lin's head. "This child," the man murmured softly, a trace of emotion surfacing within his voice, "possesses extraordinary perseverance." Then, after a pause, he sighed, "But his talent is lacking. What a pity, what a great pity." With one final, lingering glance, he turned and continued descending, leaving Wang Lin behind to struggle alone against the mountain. Night fell. Wang Lin's hands were torn open, flesh split, and bleeding freely. Every movement carved new wounds into his palms, and the stone steps behind him were stained with his blood. He did not know how he still moved. He did not know what force sustained him. Only that something deep within his soul, refused to let him stop. At any moment, he felt he could collapse. At any moment, he could die. Yet still, he climbed. Dawn broke on the 3rd day. Through blurred vision, Wang Lin saw it. The end of the path. Faint, distant, but real. Hope flickered weakly within his chest. And then, a voice thundered across the mountain, shaking the very air. "Time is up." The words struck like lightning. Only 3 have qualified. The rest failed. Wang Lin's body trembled. A faint, bitter laugh escaped his lips. So, This was the end. His gaze lowered. His body slumped sideways against the cold stone steps, and then darkness claimed him. At the summit, the black-clad, middle-aged man from 3 days prior stood in silence. His gaze fell upon Wang Lin, who lay less than 50 meters away. There was no warmth in his eyes, only cold, ruthless judgment. Several Hengyue sect disciples descended the mountain, moving swiftly from one fallen youth to another. Each time they stopped, they fed medicine into the unconscious bodies, preserving what little life remained. One of them, a female disciple, spoke coldly. Seniors, among the 39 participants, 25 gave up midway. 3 have passed the trial, 11 remain. Her voice carried neither pride nor sorrow. She, too, had once walked this same path. Relying on the martial arts she had trained in since childhood, she had barely endured the trial. Even now, after 10 long years of effort, she had yet to become a true disciple. The black-clad man nodded slightly. His gaze swept over the 11 unconscious youths, his expression unchanged. "Take the 3 who passed," he said calmly. "Arrange their duties within the sect. The 25 who surrendered, return them to their families. As for the remaining 11, wait until they awaken, then send them to the House of the Sword Spirit." He paused briefly. "If any among them possess affinity with the Sword Spirit, they may still remain. If not," his voice turned colder, "send them home." Without another glance, he turned and walked away. 3 days later, within the House of the Sword Spirit, 11 youths stood in silence. Their faces were pale, their bodies still bearing the memory of pain. Wang Lin stood among them. Though his wounds had healed, the wound within his heart had not. Failure lingered within him like a shadow, gnawing at his thoughts, eroding his spirit. This final trial was not overseen by the black-clad man. Instead, a man dressed in white stood before them. His expression was cold, his gaze sharp. To him, these youths were no more than insects awaiting judgment. "This," he said impatiently, "is your final test. If you can enter this room, you qualify." Wang Lin lifted his head. Before him stood an ordinary building. Its door was open. Inside, rows of swords could be seen, long and short, ancient and gleaming, each radiating a quiet, oppressive presence. One by one, the youths stepped forward. The first approached. When he reached 5 meters from the entrance, his face flushed red. His body trembled as though crushed by an invisible force. He struggled, forcing himself forward, but he could not advance another step. Suddenly, he was thrown backward, expelled by an unseen power. Unqualified next. The man in white spoke without emotion. The second youth stepped forward, then the third, the fourth, the fifth. The sixth each met the same fate. None could pass beyond that invisible boundary. Wang Lin was 7th. A bitter smile crossed his lips. Was this his final attempt? With the last fragment of hope still burning within him, he stepped forward. 5 meters. He crossed it. No resistance. His heart began to pound violently. One more step. Still nothing. No pressure. No force. The man in white let out a soft sound of surprise. "Interesting." His eyes lit with faint curiosity. "Do not hesitate," he said calmly. "Continue forward. If the Sword Spirit acknowledges you, you may still become a true disciple, even if you failed the previous trials." Behind Wang Lin, the remaining youths stared. Their eyes burned with envy. Wang Lin's chest tightened. His parents' faces surfaced once more within his mind. Their expectations, their hope. He took another step. Closer. Only 3 meters remained. Then, a force descended. Sudden, overwhelming, like a mountain crashing down upon him. Before he could react, his body lost control. He was thrown backward, sent flying more than 10 meters through the air before crashing onto the ground. Silence fell. The other youths looked at him with mocking expressions. So, he was no different after all. Just another failure. A bitter laugh escaped Wang Lin's lips. Within his chest, the wound tore open wider. The images of his parents slowly faded. Dissolving into nothingness, the man in white's gaze returned to its former coldness. Failed. He did not look at Wang Lin again. Next.